For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling. Then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent. George shuffled the cards noisily and dealt them. Whit drew a scoring board to him and set the pegs to start. Whit said, "I guess you guys really come here to work." "How do you mean?" George asked. Whit laughed. "Well, you come on a Friday. You got 2 days to work till Sunday." "I don't see how you figure," said George. Whit laughed again. "You do if you've been around these big ranches much. Guy that wants to look over a ranch comes in Saturday afternoon. He gets Saturday night supper and 3 meals on Sunday, and he can quit Monday morning after breakfast without turning his hand. But you come to work Friday noon. You got to put in a day and a half, no matter how you figure." George looked at him levelly. "We're going to stick around a while," he said. "Me and Lenny's going to roll up a steak." The door opened quietly, and the stable buck put in his head, a lean Negro head lined with pain, the eyes patient. "Mr. Slim?" Slim took his eyes from Old Candy. "Huh? Oh, hello, Crooks. What's the matter?" "You told me to warm up that tar for the mule's foot. I got it warm." "Oh, sure, Crooks. I'll come right out and put it on." "I can do it if you want, Mr. Slim." "Nope, I'll come do it myself." He stood up. Crooks said, "Mr. Slim?" "Yeah?" "That big new guy's messing around your pups out in the barn." "Well, he ain't doing no harm. I give him one of them pups." "Just thought I'd tell you," said Crooks. "He's taking 'em out of the nest and handle 'em. That won't do him no good." "He won't hurt 'em," said Slim. "I'll come along with you now." George looked up. "If that crazy bastard's fooling around too much, just kick him out, Slim." Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt, and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. "Seen the new kid yet?" he asked. "What kid?" George asked. "Why, Curly's new wife." "Yeah, I seen her." "Well, ain't she a Lulu?" "I ain't seen that much of her," said George. Whit laid down his cards impressively. "Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing. I never seen nobody like her. She got the eye going all the time on everybody. I bet she even gives the stable buck the eye. I don't know what the hell she wants." George asked casually, "Been any trouble since she got here?" It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down, and George scooped it in. George laid out his deliberate solitaire hand, 7 cards, 6 on top, and 5 on top of those. Whit said, "I see what you mean. No, they ain't been nothing yet. Curly's got yellow jackets in his drawers, but that's all so far. Every time the guys is around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she'd left something laying around and she's looking for it. Seems like she can't keep away from guys. And Curly's pants is just crawling with ants, but they ain't nothing come of it yet." George said, "She gonna make a mess. There's gonna be a bad mess about her. She's a jailbait all set out on the trigger. That Curly got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it ain't no place for a girl, especially like her." Whit said, "If you got ideas, you ought to come in town with us guys tomorrow night." "Well, why? What's doing?" "Just the usual thing. We go into old Susie's place. Hell of a nice place. Old Susie's a laugh, always cracking jokes. Like she says when we come up on the front porch last Saturday night. Susie opens the door, and then she yells over her shoulder, 'Get your coats on, girls. Here comes the sheriff.' She never talks dirty, neither. Got 5 girls there." "What's it set you back?" George asked. 2.5. "And you can get a shot of whiskey for 2 bits. Susie got nice chairs to sit in, too. If a guy don't want to flop, why, he can just sit in the chairs and have a couple or 3 shots and pass the time of day, and Susie don't give a damn. She ain't rushing guys through and kicking them out if they don't want to flop." "Might go in, look the joint over," said George. "Sure, come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun, her cracking jokes all the time. Like she says one time, she says, 'I knew people that if they got a rag rug on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp on the phonograph, they think they're running a parlor house.' That's Clara's house she's talking about. And Susie says, 'I know what you boys want,' she says. 'My girls is clean,' she says, 'and there ain't no water in my whiskey,' she says. 'If any of you guys want to look at a Cupid doll lamp and take your own chance getting burned, why, you know where to go.' And she says, 'There's guys around here walking bow-legged because they like to look at a Cupid doll lamp.'" George asked, "Clara runs the other house, huh?" "Yeah," said Whit. "We don't never go there. Clara gets $3 a crack and 35 cents a shot, and she don't crack no jokes. But Susie's place is clean, and she got nice chairs. Don't let no goo-goos in, neither." "Me and Lenny's rolling up a steak," said George. I might go in and set and have a shot, but I ain't putting out no 2.5. Well, a guy gotta have some fun sometime, said Whit. The door opened and Lenny and Carlson came in together. Lenny crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at old Candy, who still faced the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them on his bed and then brought out the pistol, took out the magazine, and snapped the loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with the little rod. When the ejector snapped, Candy turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned back to the wall again. Carlson said casually, "Curly been in yet?" "No," said Whit. "What's eating on Curly?" Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun. "Looking for his old lady. I seen him going round and round outside." Whit said sarcastically, "He spends half his time looking for her, and the rest of the time she's looking for him." Curly burst into the room excitedly. "Any of you guys seen my wife?" he demanded. "She ain't been here," said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. "Where the hell's Slim?" "Went out in the barn," said George. "He's going to put some tar on a split hoof." Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. "How long ago did he go?" 5, 10 minutes." Curly jumped out the door and banged it after him. Whit stood up. "I guess maybe I'd like to see this," he said. "Curly's just spoiling, or he wouldn't start for Slim. And Curly's handy, goddamn handy. Got in the finals for the Golden Gloves. He got newspaper clippings about it." He considered. "But just the same, he better leave Slim alone. Nobody don't know what Slim can do." "Think Slim's with his wife, don't he?" said George. "Looks like it," Whit said. "Of course, Slim ain't. At least I don't think Slim is. But I like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, let's go." George said, "I'm staying right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lenny and me got to make a steak." Carlson finished the cleaning of the gun and put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. "I guess I'll go out and look her over," he said. Old Candy lay still, and Lenny, from his bunk, watched George cautiously. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lenny. "What you got on your mind?" "I ain't done nothing, George. Slim says I better not pet them pups so much for a while. Slim says it ain't good for 'em, so I come right in. I been good, George." "I could have told you that," said George. "Well, I wasn't hurting 'em none. I just had mine in my lap, petting it." George asked, "Did you see Slim out in the barn?" "Sure I did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more." "Did you see that girl?" You mean Curly's girl?" "Yeah, did she come in the barn?" "No. Anyways, I never seen her." "You never seen Slim talking to her?" She ain't been in the barn." "Okay," said George. "I guess them guys ain't gonna see no fight. If there's any fighting, Lenny, you keep out of it." "I don't want no fights," said Lenny. He got up from his bunk and sat down at the table across from George. Almost automatically, George shuffled the cards and laid out his solitaire hand. He used a deliberate, thoughtful slowness. Lenny reached for a face card and studied it, and then turned it upside down and studied it. "Both ends the same," he said. "George, why is both ends the same?" "I don't know," said George. "That's just the way they make 'em." "Say, what was Slim doing in the barn when you seen him?" "Slim?" "Sure, you seen him in the barn, and he told you not to pet the pup so much?" "Oh, yeah, he had a can of tar and a paintbrush. I don't know what for." "You sure that girl didn't come in like she come in here today?" "No, she never come." George sighed. "You give me a good whorehouse every time," he said. "A guy can go in and get drunk and get everything out of his system all at once, and no messes. And he knows how much it's going to set him back. These here jailbaits is set on the trigger of the hooskow." Lenny followed his words admiringly and moved his lips a little to keep up. George continued. "You remember Andy Cushman, Lenny? Went to grammar school?" The one that his old lady used to make hotcakes for the kids?" Lenny asked. "Yeah, that's the one. You can remember anything if there's something to eat in it." George looked carefully at the solitaire hand. He put an ace up on his scoring rack and piled the 2, 3, and 4 of diamonds on it. "Andy's in San Quentin right now, on account of a tart," said George. Lenny drummed on the table with his fingers. "George?" "Eh?" "George, how long's it gonna be till we get that little place and live on the fat of the land? And rabbits." "I don't know," said George. "We gotta get a big steak together." "I know a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't giving it away." Old Candy turned slowly over. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. Lenny said, "Tell about that place, George." "I just told you just last night." "Go on, tell again, George." "Well, It's 10 acres, said George. Got a little windmill. Got a little shack on it and a chicken run. Got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, cots, nuts. Got a few berries. There's a place for alfalfa and plenty water to flood it. There's a pig pen. And rabbits, George. Well, no place for rabbits now, but I could easy build a few hutches and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits. Damn right I could, said Lenny. You goddamn right I could. George's hand stopped working with the cards. His voice was growing warmer. And we could have a few pigs. I could build a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had, and when we kill a pig, we can smoke the bacon and the hams and make sausage and all like that. And when the salmon run up river, we could catch 100 of them and salt them down or smoke them. We could have them for breakfast. They ain't nothing so nice as smoked salmon. When the fruit come in, we can can it. And tomatoes, they're easy to can. Every Sunday, we'd kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we'd have a cow or a goat. And the cream is so goddamn thick, you gotta cut it with a knife and take it out with a spoon. Lenny watched him with wide eyes, and old Candy watched him too. Lenny said softly, we could live off the fat of the land. Sure, said George. All kinds of vegetables in the garden. If we want a little whiskey, we can sell a few eggs or something, or some milk. We'd just live there. We'd belong there. There wouldn't be no more running around the country getting fed by a Jap cook. No, sir, we'd have our own place where we belonged, and not sleep in no bunkhouse. Tell about the house, George, Lenny begged. Sure, we'd have a little house and room to ourselves. Little fat iron stove, and in the winter we'd keep a fire going in it. It ain't enough land, so we'd have to work too hard, maybe 6, 7 hours a day. We wouldn't have to buck no barley 11 hours a day. And when we put in a crop, why, we'd be there to take the crop up. We'd know what come of our planting. And rabbits, Lenny said eagerly. And I'd take care of them. Tell how I'd do that, George. Sure. You'd go out in the alfalfa patch and you'd have a sack. You'd fill up the sack and bring it in and put it in the rabbit cages. They'd nibble and they'd nibble, said Lenny. The way they do, I seen 'em. Every 6 weeks or so, George continued, them does would throw a litter and we'd have plenty rabbits to eat and to sell. And we'd keep a few pigeons to go flying around the windmill like they done when I was a kid. He looked raptly at the wall over Lenny's head. And it'd be our own, and nobody could can us. If we don't like a guy, we can say, get the hell out, and by God, he's got to do it. And if a friend come along, why, we'd have an extra bunk, and we'd say, why don't you spend the night? And by God, he would. We'd have a setter dog and a couple striped cats, but you got to watch out them cats don't get the little rabbits. Lenny breathed hard. You just let them try to get the rabbits. I'll break their goddamn necks. I'll smash them with a stick. He subsided, grumbling to himself, threatening the future cats, which might dare to disturb the future rabbits. George sat entranced with his own picture. When Candy spoke, they both jumped, as though they had been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, You know where there's a place like that? George was on guard immediately. Suppose I do, he said. What's that to you? You don't need to tell me where it's at. It might be any place. Sure, said George. That's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. How much they want for a place like that? George watched him suspiciously. Well, I could get it for $600. The old people that owns it's flat bust, and the old lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us. Candy said, I ain't much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they give me a job swamping. And they give me $250 because I lost my hand. And I got 50 more saved up right in the bank right now. That's $300, and I got 50 more coming the end of the month. Tell you what, he leaned forward eagerly. Suppose I went in with you guys. That's $350 I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be? George half closed his eyes. I gotta think about that. We was always gonna do it by ourselves. Candy interrupted him. I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, 'cause I ain't got no relatives or nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do it right now. George spat on the floor disgustedly. We got $10 between us. Then he said thoughtfully, Look, if me and Lenny work a month and don't spend